There we go. All right. Well, hi, ladies. How are you?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Good.
Uh, so I'm super happy to be here with Alicia Beekman, voiceover agent, theatrical agent, everything extraordinaire from DDO Kids in LA, and Molly Miller, casting associate in the animation department, correct, in Nickelodeon Animation.
Yes.
So welcome, ladies. First of all, how are you guys doing in this quarantine, crazy COVID-19 era? Alicia?
Surviving. We're keeping busy, especially with VO. It's rolling. So fortunate that I have my kids working and good jobs and whatnot. So it's going okay, okay as it can be.
Yeah. Molly?
Personally, going very stir crazy.
Me too.
Professionally, we are still as busy as ever
Right. That's a little different.
in the animation world because animation seems to be one of the very few mediums in the entertainment industry that's still completely active and still running. So very, very
Yeah,
busy.
not affected. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Let's just quickly start about who you are, where you work, and kind of a little bit of your background. Alicia, you want to start?
Yeah. I'm Alicia Beekman. I work at DDO Artist Agency in DDO Kids in LA. I run the kids voiceover department as well as I run the kids on camera theatrical department with Laura Theed. And I've been in the business for 8 years. Voiceover business for about 6. I've been a VO agent for about 6 years, and specifically working with kids for the last 4 or so, and been at DDO Kids for a year.
Nice. Molly?
I'm Molly. I work in Nickelodeon or work at Nickelodeon Animation in the voiceover space. So I work in casting and talent development. I've been at Nick for about 5 years now, almost 5 years. Prior to that, I was mostly working in like the commercial casting space and music video casting, which is a whole other, life that I led. Um, so working currently in voiceover predominantly, and it's really a good mix between kids and adults right now. I would say we work with, it's like a mixed bag.
I understand. I'm going to get to the first question, but that I understand because for the longest time, Alicia and I were just talking about this. I was a manager and I represented EG Daily, and EG. So I
Oh, I
say
didn't
that
even
because
know that.
yeah, and she did one of these for us. But EG, what everybody should know, EG is Tommy Pickles on the Rugrats. She's Buttercup on Powerpuff Girls. But I mentioned that because you said kids and adults. She's an adult who primarily plays young boy kid roles in
Yes.
the voiceover space.
Yes.
So that actually will be my first question. What is it like? What's the difference of like it being kids in voiceover and adults in voiceover? Would they prefer to hire an adult to do a kid voice, or do they truly want to get a kid to do that voice? Molly, I'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we get all the time from actors, especially too. It really truly depends on the individual production and the tone of your cartoon, right? So, in an example like Rugrats, where EG does play the lead boy, like the little boy, Tommy Pickles, that show is much more like hyper stylized. It's very toony. It's very, its jokes are very like pushed and laugh out loud funny. So they really felt, it's also a legacy project. It was on the air many moons ago. So they really felt like that needed the adult comedy aspect. It wasn't going to be served by a child actor. Not to say that a child actor couldn't do it. It just like they really wanted to push the funny and push the adult comedy, so to speak. And then there's other shows that are much more based in realism, and they really like those performances from kids that you're only going to get from a child actor, right? Like you're only going to get that sweet, genuine innocence from kids sometimes. So it really depends on the show.
It's case by case. Alicia, do you feel the same? Like, do you guys have in your department and in your agency? Is it strictly kids, or will you have adults who can play kids' voices?
So my department specifically is DDO kids. So I do rep over 18 to voice younger, but I focus on kids. And then we have an adult voiceover department, a different agent, Julie, who reps the adults. And it just depends again on the project. Sometimes we'll see they're looking for auditions from both kids and adults to voice kids. Normally, if it's going to be only adults to voice kids, it usually, as Molly was saying, is going to be a little bit toonier voices, less grounded and natural, because even adults that do great kids voices, usually they're going to be a little more animated and a little more charactery. But there are definitely a lot of projects that want real kids to voice young. I mean, as young as I have 4-year-olds that work on animated series. So you're going to get a different kind of performance from a 4-year-old than you would for an adult to play.
Yeah. Will they accept both, Molly? Like, will they say, like, can Alicia submit, I have an adult who, or Julie, the other agent, I have an adult who plays the young boy really, really well, but I also have a couple young boys that can play that. Will they accept both over 18 and under 18 for a role, or is it very specific, Molly?
I feel like it's very trend driven. So when I was first starting in VO, we had creators that would come out and say, it absolutely has to be an adult that plays a kid, or it absolutely has to be a kid. I won't listen to an adult. Like, there's just something about the kid sound. But lately, more and more creators seem to be much more flexible as they're trying to kind of figure out what their show actually sounds like, especially first-time creators. So we've been I actually just sent a breakdown to Alicia last week or the week before, where I was looking for 4 different kid roles. And the creator really wanted to hear both adults and kids, because they were like, I don't know, I can really see the show going this direction, but I can also see it going in this direction. So it truly depends.
Yeah.
On ours, they always specify it. So like Molly will send a breakdown and it'll say either seeking real kids to play whatever. It usually is pretty specific, even if they're saying, seeking kids ages 6 to 8 to play 4. Or like knowing they want a little more mature, but they still want a real kid. Or it'll say, like that breakdown from Molly last week said, seeking real kids and adults to voice younger. So
got it. And then does that mean, Alicia, that you would work with Julie, the other agent, and really try to just put in your best people and your kid side and your adult side?
Yeah, we just both submit. So she submits her adults that can voice young, and I'll submit my over 18 that can voice young.
Got it.
Really
how does someone, I know this is sort of a general question, and I think I'll start with you, Alicia, but how does one break into voiceover? What is the best way? I mean, there's sort of those misnomers out there of like, you have to have an amazing reel, or you have to take all these voiceover classes first, or you have like, what would be the very, very first step for someone to break into voiceover, and then ultimately maybe get noticed by you, Alicia, and repped?
Yeah. I mean, classes is definitely the first step. I think that you could have, a lot of times you hear people tell me I should be in voiceover because I have a good voice. And I mean, good for you. A good voice is good, but you don't know how to use your voice, and you don't know how to use your voice in voiceover until you are actually trained in that. So I think just dabbling in, taking a commercial VO class, taking an animation VO class, figuring out kind of what your strengths are. It doesn't necessarily correlate well for on-camera actors. Like I have in the past had a lot of on-camera actors who are very successful, great actors, who it doesn't translate well to VO, even though they're amazing actors, especially not to animation, which is kind of a whole different ballpark. But I would always say VO classes, VO coaching, especially if you're into animation, with people who have been in casting, especially on the casting end, because a lot of people that are in animation casting also coach, and that's a good place to start to kind of see where you are. And then it would be to find an agent, which the real thing, the REEL thing, is tough, because if you're a kid, I would say you don't need a reel. Like if someone's submitting to me and you send me a bunch of just voice samples that sound really good, animation samples, and a commercial sample, like that's all I need. Real voiceover reels are really expensive to produce. And for adults, it's a little more necessary, but for kids, it's really not. So I would spend more time and money on the coaching and understanding your voice and learning your characters and all of that, rather than creating a reel, at least for kids.
Yeah. And Molly, I mean, obviously in the theatrical world, it's about a resume. Does that matter to you, or is it really just about the tone? This voice makes the most sense, or do you look at a resume?
I mean, I would never turn down a headshot with a resume on the back. I like to see what people have worked on and the experience that they've had on camera or in commercial work. Or it's always good to know, like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, this kid can handle himself being on set with all of these different actors for hours at a time. Like, that's really great to know. But no, at the end of the day, it's purely talent based, and like Alicia said, it starts with taking classes and coaching and honing that skill. And I think a really big thing, and I would love to stress this, is that if we're talking kids specifically, I think there has to be a desire, right? Like I've
Mhm.
seen too many times where parents are forcing the child to audition, or like really pushing something that might have been their passion or something that they would love for their kid to get into. But you can just tell when a kid walks into an audition or when they read, like, they don't even want to be here. So why are they here? Like, it really needs to start with the desire to want to act and to want to be a voiceover actor specifically. So, and that combined, just like Alicia said, with taking classes, with getting coaching, that's very valuable.
You mentioned coming into the room. I mean, obviously that's well, look, that's not going to become a new normal for
Right, not
theatrical.
right now.
Yeah, yeah. But the how often would that even happen? In like, do you guys have a booth that they would come to, or is it mainly they would be sending you samples from their home or from their phone, or sending it through their agent would be sending it to you? Is what was more common pre, and then we'll go into post. Obviously, probably very unknown. I'll start with you, Molly, and then I have a follow up for you, Alicia.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it varies depending on studio. So at Nick, we do a combination of both, right? We receive hundreds and hundreds of auditions every day that are just MP3 files, which obviously it means you can receive bulk auditions and you can just go through and listen very, very fast. You don't have to have the face to face, give the feedback,
Mm-hmm.
and try to tweak the reads. My personal preference, and what I think a lot of people on my casting team also prefer, is having that face-to-face interaction with an actor. So being able to, after I listen to their very first tape that, let's say, DDO submits to me, right? And I really like one of their kids from DDO. I want to be able to call them into the booth. At Nickelodeon, we have 3 in-house booths, which is really cool. They get to come to Nickelodeon, which is in and of itself a really cool building in Burbank.
It's fun. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, it's
there's
fun.
like memorabilia everywhere. It's very colorful and vibrant, and I get to work with them one on one, or members of my team get to work with them one on one. So I really get to tweak the exact performance I'm looking for. So it's a little bit of both. When you have more time to work on a project, it's always better to have that face to face. But now, especially,
Yeah.
all we can do are just self tapes. So we're
Right.
really relying on the agents to say, like, okay, this self tape was great, but like, how much editing went into this? What is the kid like in real life? Like, what is, we're really relying on those relationships that we've already formed because we don't get to be face to face with kids now. So,
Right.
yeah, a little of both.
Yeah. And Alicia, for you, is that like, do you tell all your clients they have to have a specific app, or they have like, e.g., I know, I mean, because she's been doing it for so long, she has a booth in her house. I don't think they have to go that far in the beginning, but is there certain apps, or is there certain things that you tell them that they really do need to do at home via the voiceover world or whatever?
So that's kind of the question of quarantine, and has been a large focus is figuring that out. Pre-quarantine, I mean, we don't have a booth at DDO. A lot of voiceover agents now don't have booths, so when I send an audition, they are recording at home or they're recording in a studio, them to me. So people have to have some kind of setup that sounds good, even normally, whether it's their own studio or they're comfortable going in somewhere to record. Now, now it's just been a whole adventure. Every project, every studio is different. Like Nickelodeon animation, actually a lot of the animation studios are still being pretty flexible with it, in terms of like, if the kid books, we'll figure it out. There
Mhm.
are a lot of places though that, especially commercially or some video game stuff, that they say when they send it out, you need to have a home setup that it's at least this quality, and you have to have XYZ connection, source connect, ISDN, something. Um, so kind of figuring out that balance of what I want or need my clients to have has definitely been an adventure. But a lot of my kids have and parents have worked very hard in this time to create home setups that really sound good, with at least good quality mics, good insulation. If they're not already familiar with basic editing, get that down. And then we at DDO have created a whole site of samples of kids that and adults, for adults that have fully functioning home setups, so that when casting does need it and don't have time to put out a whole casting, or don't have time to send someone recording supplies or whatever it is, they're there already and set up. So it's definitely been adventure and
Yeah.
figuring it out.
All of this has for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
I know
even
that's the
like,
right word, adventure.
yeah, even the on-camera world, which too, Alicia, is like,
Yeah.
you can get a couple good lights from Amazon. You can get you can figure out a good setup, because this is going to be for a while. So like,
Right.
let's figure it out at home.
I think
What do
if
you?
you're serious about VO, then yes, like at least getting together a decent home setup. It doesn't have to be like thousands of dollars into like a whole sound booth, but like at least enough of a home setup where you have your files just like nicely edited. They sound good to begin with. They're crisp, they're clear, the sound is good. Because that's only going to be a good investment for
Totally.
you. And you can do it not that expensive. You can create a decent setup for not that much money.
Yeah. I'm gonna get to some questions, but I have one more question for you, Alicia, before I go to this other the public ones. Is there like a weighted? It's animation, or weighted in video games, or weighted in VO commercials? Like, is it? Do you ever see, or is there? And is there seasons to it? Like, we have our pilot season, which is not really a pilot season anymore, but because it's all year long. But you know what I mean? Like, do you ever see like where there's, oh, this time of year is all going to be video games, or this time of year Nickelodeon's starting to do all their animation or something like that? Is it weighted in certain areas sometimes?
I mean, it feels that way, that I will, go 2 weeks without animation and then I get 14 projects in a day. But no, not in the same way. I mean, for kids, it's always animation heavy, just because there's not as much commercial VO work for kids, or video games or promo stuff for kids. There's definitely work out there, but not as much as animation. I think like studio by studio is going to differ. Like Molly may have a different answer to that in terms of like how the seasons look for Nickelodeon, but I feel like it's always pretty consistent of different projects going on. I feel like you guys are always busy, Molly, and you always have stuff going on year round. Feels that way.
It feels that
So
way
I
to
will
me
throw it to you,
too.
Molly. Like, is there sort of is there like a pilot season like we have? Is there a busier time than others? Like, where creators of all these animation shows have come out and we've greenlit them or whatever. Like, is there a weighted time for you too?
Not necessarily. We always have projects that are in development, and because that's really where my focus is right now, at Nickelodeon, is projects that are in development. So there's always things that we're working on, and we're always sending out breakdowns. Some months might be heavier than others, but I could never pinpoint like, oh, June is our busiest, or July, or they're
Right.
really, it's so up in the air.
You just never know. Yeah.
It's
Deborah.
whenever they have content.
Yeah. Yeah. Deborah Harvey said, "I've heard that it's harder to do voiceover than acting, since your acting has to be through your voice. Is that true? Meaning, like, is it harder to get into? I mean, you could attest to this, Alicia. Is it harder to get into VO than it is to book a commercial or something on camera?"
Well, there's two different questions there. I think she's asking like physically, is it harder to do voiceover than
Yeah, I don't know.
on-camera acting? because there's no visual. That's kind of what I got from that question. And I would say it's just different. Like some people really have a knack for animation because they tend to go bigger, which tends to be more what you're doing in animation because you do have to get everything out that when you're on camera you have your hand motions and your facial expressions
And
and
your
everything
facial, yeah.
so it's just different. There are people who really excel in that with animation, but for on camera are too big. They can't bring it down. And vice versa, that people are so grounded and they're such good on camera actors that when it doesn't always translate very well to animation because it's hard to get them up and creating that character with just their voice.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of breaking into VO, same thing. I mean, it's always going to depend on your experience and your talent and your representation and everything involved.
In Sierra Lowry says, in animation during the process, how does it feel for you going through the days of what projects you do, whether it is a busy time or a setback? What is your favorite time? What has been your favorite animation content to work on? I don't understand the first part of that question. I don't know if you guys do, but I would say, what is your favorite animation content to work on? Like, I don't know. That's odd too. Like Molly can't really say, well, I only like this one show.
I'm gonna list off all my favorite shows, and a creator will watch this.
Right.
I mean, it's a good question.
I'll pose it this way. Have you ever had a project that you truly, truly loved that maybe didn't go as long or didn't, it was something that you really loved and you sunk your teeth into, Molly, and then all of a sudden, no, it wasn't a hit or didn't go long enough at Nickelodeon?
Oh my God, so many times. I think that's also the stress and the hardship of working in development. And this is, over animation and live action. It's like you get very attached to specific projects, to characters. I get very personally attached to characters. And then all of a sudden one, executive is just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Or like, here are the reasons why we can no longer make this. And I'm sure there are lots of logistical reasons, but when you're just looking at that and you're like, wow, what could have been done differently? Like I would have done anything to keep the show. But that's how, like, the nature of the beast, I guess. That's how the industry works. There are some really, really great shows that just don't make it to air, or they do make it to air and they get cut too early. And I've had so many like that. But that's my cross to bear because I chose to work in development. So
yeah. What about you, Alicia? Is there a balancing act? Like, is it possible for your clients to do an amazing VO project, but also balancing that with an on-camera world?
Yeah, definitely. That's the nice thing about VO is that it's usually not covered in a series contract. So if we have a kid on a series on camera, they are usually also able to do animated features or work on animated series, which is really nice. Yeah, and I mean, what Molly said.
So there's no exclusivity?
What?
So there's no exclusivity? Like they if they're doing, let's say they're on a show for Molly, one of her shows, they can go and do regular pilot season on camera?
Theoretically, yes. I mean, it depends on the exact situation and the exact contracts, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Animation is nice and flexible, and even when you're a series regular on an animated series, not that verbiage is used, but you're working, you're not working full days, so it's nice because you can fit in what you need to fit in. Yeah, I have a kid on a series that just worked on a big animated feature and has been like, they fit him in here and there, and just on days off, if his call time on set on camera is at 2 p.m., they can get him in the morning to record, and it's nice, really nice.
Yeah,
I'm busy.
I have a question for both of you, and I'll get to your question, KJ. But when they do, like, they talk about sometimes how they do voiceovers and how they put them together, and and EG actually said it was a special experience because all the characters were in the room at the same time, all the actors were in the room at the same time. But you hear that sometimes that is not true. Is that helpful or harmful to the overall show? And is it easier for adults to do it that way as opposed to kids to do it that way? I'll start with you, Molly.
Yeah, that's a Molly question.
Yeah, I think it was much more common to do, we call them ensemble records. It was much more common to do those back in the day, you know, like SpongeBob still records an ensemble because that's what they're used to. Because you do get that connection between the actors, they all get to play off of one another and riff. And sometimes the best jokes in the booth are made from completely like it just two actors improvising together because they happen to be put in the booth at the same time. It's less and less common these days, and to be quite honest, that really has to do with schedules. Like the actors that we're working with are now so busy, which is an amazing thing. We want them to be working on lots of different projects and honing their acting skills, but because of that, it makes it harder to say like, okay, from Thursdays 2 to 6, we're going to have, you know, this show record with 10 cast members. Like the likelihood of getting all 10 of those people is very slim. So, yeah, there's something magical about having all actors in a booth together, playing and finding characters and discovering things. But I don't think it, you know, it's petering out a little bit as we go on, and especially with kids, sometimes we like to have kids separate. Just because it's like their own personal one-on-one time with the director and the casting rep. So it's kind of, it's varied.
It's case by case. And what about you, Alicia? Do you see like not even just in the Nickelodeon animation, but in all of the animation they use, is it more popular to have it done separately or have them all in a group setting?
For animation, definitely more common for them to do it separately. There are certain projects where they do like them to record together. Certain like a lot of times, like I'm thinking of one specific like podcast, the scripted podcast that a lot of my kids work on. They like to do them all at the same time. So there are definitely exceptions, but it is a lot more common for them to be going in on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michelle Bivens says, when auditioning for a voiceover, should you use a character voice? What's best?
To this, I can go first on that one.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anytime you have an audition, you need to do your research first, especially with animation. So when you get an animation audition, you should be looking, if the show already exists, you should make sure that you're watching a few episodes of that show and getting the feel for what the characters are doing. If it doesn't exist, you usually will have a list of the creators, a list of the producers. At least you have the network. So maybe even if you don't have the producers or something, you would know it's Nickelodeon Animation. So you should be watching a few different Nickelodeon Animation shows. And that will dictate how character of a voice is. You know, some shows are always going to be bigger. Like if you do listen to Rugrats, just because we've been talking about Rugrats, or SpongeBob, right? Like those are character voices. They're pretty much all character voices. You know that you're going to be creating a character. Whereas other shows, I'm thinking of a Disney show. Sorry, Molly. Like Doc McStuffins. If you watch it, the people are all really grounded, natural voices, where the little characters and the stuffed animals are all character voices. So you know if you're auditioning to be a kid, you're going to be sounding differently than if you're auditioning to be a little stuffed kangaroo or whatever. And if it's not a show that's already on the same thing, you look at the shows that the producers and the castings everyone's worked on before, and you can get a feel for it, for how character-y it should be.
Yeah. Molly, what about you? Is it do your producers or creators tell you this is like they told you whether they wanted a kid or an adult? Do they tell you specifically, I want over the top, I want a character, I want real and grounded? Are they very specific in what they tell you that they want?
Yes, absolutely. And if they're not specific, we push them so that they have to be, because it's a waste of everyone's time to have a fully laid out character description and then to receive auditions that don't match what you're looking for. So we want to, in that initial breakdown that we send to agents, we want to be as thorough as possible. And we want to say like, hey, natural voices only, or, you know, this creator prefers more grounded styles. This creator likes characters, so come with like your weirdest, you know, British fish. It's like some show, and Alicia's so right, the best actors are the ones that come prepared and know, okay, this woman, made this show, this guy made this show, and it was very toony and over the top, so maybe I'll provide this read. I also, a lot of this is something that's, it goes back and forth with casting folks, but I don't mind when actors submit two versions of a read. I like when they submit two sometimes, especially if I'm not, in a super hurry to go through auditions and present selects, because I like to know that A, they can give me two voices, and B, they can be charactery and be grounded. So it's not a requirement. It definitely doesn't put one person above another if they do submit two, but it's not a bad idea,
Yeah, shows versatility too.
Absolutely,
Mary
yeah.
Tupin,
And you
her
can
son
correct me
Ethan.
if I'm wrong, Molly. Oh, sorry. I was
No,
just
go
going to
ahead.
add, in terms of doing two takes, that I think there's a little bit of a delay, so I'm sorry if I'm talking over you. That to make sure, if you're giving two takes, that you're actually giving two different takes, because I know that one of my biggest pet peeves as an agent is when I get two takes and it's evident that it's because they couldn't decide which of the two takes to send me, and they're like almost exactly the same.
Yes.
So then I've
Oh
sat
yeah,
and listened to two different takes that sound almost identical. Or they'll say, here are two takes, pick the best one, whatever. But when I send a casting, like, if you have two different takes on the character, like, that's what a take is. Like, maybe the character is British and maybe the character is, whatever your two different takes are, or more charactery over the top, more grounded.
right.
Make sure that they are two different takes if you're going to do that, because otherwise you're wasting, like, Molly has hundreds of MP3s per roll. And I know how frustrated I get just listening to just my kids when they're sending more than one take that are almost identical. So I can't really imagine how annoying
That makes sense.
for you.
Show the versatility, not just, oh, like I did them similar. Which one do you think is best? I totally agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Mary Tupin, her son Ethan's with us. She says, what if a kid is on a series and they mature their voice matures? What happens to their character? It's a good question. Molly?
Ooh. Okay. This is, again, very different across all shows. It's something that everyone in animation is aware of when they are casting a young boy, right? It's never really an issue with girls. Sometimes it can be, not as frequently. But when you're casting a young boy, and creators love like the lead to be like a 10 going on 11-year-old boy, and I'm like, I love
Which is
that,
right on
but
that cusp of that.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, but like, their voice is gonna change. So various things have happened. If you look at Hey Arnold, um, Arnold was supposed to be I think he was supposed to be like a 12, 13-year-old boy, and they ended up going through 4 to 5 kids to voice that role because they still wanted to keep that energy of a 12-year-old boy. So they kept casting sound-alikes, is what we call them. So we would match that very first Arnold, and then we would keep trying to match his energy and his actual voice. Sometimes, like you'll see on Steven Universe, is that the show I'm thinking of, where or Adventure Time, where they cast a young boy and the creators were fully aware that that he was going to age out, but they ended up going along with it. And sometimes the story progresses and the kid ages in the story too. So it's hard with animation because characters are usually stuck in time. So the 11-year-old boy in season 1 is still going to be the 11-year-old boy in season 10. But it's a creative call, and I have been through many a recast. That is a very tough age for boys, especially.
Yeah. How does that look on your end, Alicia, when they are recast, and you have to make that call, or you have to say or then you ultimately have other kids that in that age category that can do it? I mean, is that a tough thing?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks, but it is the reality of animation, especially for boys. As Molly was saying, I've had many kids have to get recast, and that is kind of the go-to. I think it's rare that they can age with the character, because as Molly said, like, I believe Arnold was in 7th grade throughout the entire series, so you can't really have that kid sounding 16. But I think that, I always try to explain that to my kids if they're in that age group. We get many recast auditions, which is a whole different skill set, actually, is kind of voice match situation. But it's unfortunate. A lot of times that is why if you see, especially for boys like over 18 to voice 10, like that's why, because they don't want the voice to change. And it is that
Right.
12 to 17 is a really tough age for boys I mean, on camera too, but especially for VO, because they're kind of afraid of that age for a good reason.
Makes sense, yeah. Ileana Conley, her daughter Anna Mia, is with us. She says, if a VO actor is also a singer, how should this be incorporated in a reel, or should you make a separate singing reel? I guess the question too is like, if you're doing a reel, should they have singing on there? Because that could be a huge voiceover thing as well, not just doing character voices. I'll start with you, Alicia.
I'm actually interested to see what Molly has to say about this, because like I said, for me, reels aren't that important to me. I will really only use reels like if I have a new kid and I'm, just want to send them, like I'll send them to Molly and say, hey, I just signed a kid, I just want you to hear them, and I'll send the materials. But it's just not that important to me to have a physical reel. I think voice samples will do it, and same with singing samples. The big thing with singers in VO is to be able to match your singing voice to your character voice. And that is one of my biggest pet peeves as an agent is, a lot of auditions, animation auditions do say, provide a singing sample at the end. So you do the whole read and then it'll say, provide, 4 bars of your favorite pop song at the end. And you have a kid doing a cutesy little voice, and then they break into like opera sounding pop, whatever. And the point isn't to show that you have singing talent, it's to show that your character can sing. So it's kind of finding that balance. And I mean, that doesn't really answer the question about the reel, which is why I'm interested in Molly's viewpoint on that. But I think that for me, having it separate is perfectly fine, because I'm rarely sitting there listening to a full reel from start to finish.
Same. I would agree with everything Alicia just said. Reels are much more beneficial for teens to adults. Really just adults, if we're being honest. Like if Alicia or any other agent were to send me a demo reel for a kid 6 months from now, they could sound completely different. Not because their voice changed, but because kids are constantly developing who they are as a person and as an actor. So I would never want to go off of a reel that they made 6 to 8 months ago, because it's like, well, what are they like right now? Kids are constantly changing. I forget what your original question was, Joe. Sorry.
Well, I'm curious.
Now I'm forgetting. Hold on.
So
the singing,
singing, how important it is to have singing in the reels. Let's say if it was an adult, would you look for that?
No. So, and this is also just like a personal preference thing. If I am accepting demo reels, I really like them all to be separate. So I like when an actor has, if they're a professional VO actor, they typically have an animation demo reel, a commercial demo reel, a singing reel. Like, I like them all to be separated. That's just my personal preference. I do know of casting directors that are like, yep, give it all to me in one quick file. But I like it separated out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And I think that that's a hard thing about VO reels in general, is that like you can show a range, but if the first sample on your reel sounds totally different from what you're looking for the project, I think it's just really hard to go off of.
And it's counterintuitive. Yeah. Camila Johnson says, what stands out on a voiceover audition to make you want to book them? Molly?
For kids specifically, I'm looking for someone that completely embodies the character and makes it their own and makes it unique. And I know that sounds like a cop-out answer to like be unique, but it truly is. How is this child taking the material, the text that I've given them, right? A character description, a bunch of random lines that they don't even have full context of, right? They don't get a full script when they get to audition. And how do they make that character unique? And a lot of it is like, okay, this is the same. You hear it over and over and over, and they're always doing the exact same inflections and the exact same. And those aren't bad actors. Those are good actors. That's just nothing that's like, incredibly unique to me, right? If I'm looking for that sparkling, dazzling personality. It's also hard too because when you tell a kid that, kids are already so unique by nature that they then feel like they have to kind of put on something that they're not. So I kind of hate saying that, but it's really whatever they can bring to the role that makes them the best person for that role. I don't know
And
if that answered
separates
your
them.
question.
And no, it does, and separates them from everybody else because, like you said, you're seeing hundreds sometimes. So what makes them unique? I think the word unique that you used was great. You
Right.
know?
And I will give a really a fun example. Pre-COVID times when we could shake everybody's hand, we were in a very grueling 4 hour long audition process for a pilot that we were working on maybe 2 years ago. And we were seeing a lot of really great kids, you know, very talented actors, kid after kid after kid. And then one kid came into the booth and he was like, "Hey, I'm ready to party." And he came and he shaked everybody's hand and gave this whole speech about who he is and what he likes. And it was just so refreshing. And it was like, oh my God, who is this dazzling personality? And he ended up being a top select because the producer was in the room and was like, "I need that kid."
Yeah.
So it depends.
And I think too, like it's by creating something unique, that doesn't necessarily mean putting on, you know, a unique voice or something like that.
Right.
It's bringing what you have, especially as a kid, to the role. And again, like obviously all of the kids I represent, I think are fantastic. I wouldn't represent them otherwise. But if I have 15 kids reading for the same role, probably at least 12 of those are just reading the script as is, and they have a cute voice and they're good actors, so it like sounds good, but it is still the same thing over and over again even when I'm listening to them. And then you have the kids that actually break down this script, and you should always be marking up your script and playing with every line of what if I inflect this other word instead of the word that you might be immediately inclined to emphasize. The people that are deciding, oh, I'm nervous here, so maybe I'm going to do a nervous laugh in here, or pull in a stutter or something in this line. And it's just, you are bringing that character to life, and the writing's already been done. So if you're just reading what's written in a cute way, maybe you can book from that, but most likely it's going to be the kid that really takes that character and builds a whole world around it, and gives it unique characteristics and little laughs and little things that just really take you into that you are then picturing the character, which is a lot of times I'm not doing when I'm listening to MP3s, and I'm sure
Well, that's the thing too. EG had mentioned she, she knows a lot of all the voiceover people. They all know each other. But I went to a party at her house one time, and I was like, literally, if I could just close my eyes and they all start talking, I would feel like I was in a cartoon.
voices.
Yeah, but so one of the questions, then I want to get to McLaughlin's question, but a question that I thought of was, how often do you have, because you said that kid was so amazing and he was so the personality and he was a top select or whatever, how often do you revisit? Because that happens a lot in the casting world where they're like, oh my God, this kid was so great, he didn't end up getting it, but we come back to him and he doesn't have to audition because we loved his voice, or maybe he does, but how often do you revisit? And second part to that is, how many, like on The Simpsons, you know how they each do like 5 different voices? Is that common at Nickelodeon, where one actor might voice several of them? So the first part is, how often do you revisit somebody that didn't get it? And then the next one is, how do they?
I revisit all the time. Sorry, I'm on my cell phone, so I'm trying to adjust the camera. I revisit kids all the time, and I think that's what makes a smart casting director, associate, whatever, is you find kids like, oh, maybe they're not right for this role, but oh, I'm going to remember you because I know down the line that I'm going to have a part that you're perfect for. And I feel like I can speak to all the other amazing people on my team at Nickelodeon who have their kids and their adults that they're constantly rooting for. And it's always new ones, you know, it's folks that have been auditioning with us for years, and it's people that maybe we just saw in a general audition a month ago and we can't get them out of our head. Like, I think that's what makes a strong casting representative, because you are looking out for the talent and you're trying to find the best roles possible for talent, because at the end of the day, we love actors and we just want to find the role that fits these actors. So And the second part of your question was like how many voices we do?
Yeah, like, you know, how on The Simpsons, it's like Hank Azaria does like 5 or 6 of them. And like, you know, I mean, how common is that in Nickelodeon's world?
It's a preference, not necessarily with kids. That's never something that we have kids do unless they happen to be able to pull out a second voice, but that's not a skill we expect from kids. I always tell voice actors that come in for generals with us that they should have some different characters and different voices in their back pocket, because I think the animation landscape is changing where people are more drawn to those very, very unique sounds, like a Kristen Shaw, who just has a completely unique voice. No one can copy it. And that is her voice. That is what she's going to do for you. And it's so great. But you always want to have what we call utility players that can come in and it's to save production cost, and it's to get more like creative with an actor, right? To ask them like, hey, do you have any other act or any other voices you can do for like fish number one? Or can you just pull out like your best old guy voice for this random character that just like walks down the street? Like it's for a variety of reasons. I will be quite honest with you. It is a lot of the time to save on production. And that's how it started happening in animation, like The Simpsons and SpongeBob. They were like, how many voices can we get out of each of these actors so we don't have to bring in anyone else?
Family Guy does it too, yeah.
Yes.
Finale does it. Family Guy is that.
Yes.
How many for Seth, but does
well,
every
for
voice.
Seth, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's definitely a skill. If you are a utility player, you are more coveted in the animation space, because we know that if anything were to happen and we just needed an extra few lines and a random character, we can call on you.
Yeah.
Less so for kids. Way less so for kids.
Yeah. McKenna McLaughlin says, who's a fantastic singer, but she said, would you recommend any books or resources that would be beneficial in learning the basics of voice acting, something easy to access? Alicia?
Books. I think it's always going to be more beneficial to work one-on-one with someone, or not necessarily one-on-one, but work with a coach. In terms of a resource, there's the voiceover resource guide, which lists, a lot of different coaches and demo producers and things like that. But in general, you're always going to be better off working with somebody who can really, be listening to you and like, I can tell you the basics of voiceover, but it's not going to, like, your basics of voiceover are going to be unique to who you are. So I don't know, like, I don't personally know of any books that I feel that I think you're better off just jumping right into training with coaches, with people who've done casting, and really just learning what your own voice can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could say that there's like a really great manual that you can pull out and it's like how to be a voice actor 101. And I'm sure there are really great how-tos, but it's something different reading about it versus actually implementing it. I will say though, we work with a very talented voice actor. He works at every single studio in town. His name is D. Bradley Baker. And he has a really great website called iwannabeavoiceactor.com. It's very simple. He just kind of put together, it's like an online journal that he put together where it's just every question that he's been frequently asked and any tip that he's learned in the booth, and he's just trying to pass on his knowledge.
Yeah.
I always recommend that to folks. I think it's a really great starting place.
And I think watching these lives too, like, it's awesome that Joe's bringing all these different guests on to talk a lot of different, if you follow all these voice actors and these voice casting directors and everything, follow them on Instagram, on social media, because one of the awesome things about this quarantine is like, there is incredible content coming out of this. And
totally,
all these, even voice actors, Bob Bergen, the voice Porky Pig, like, he's been doing some Q&As, like, and I think everybody right now just like wants to offer their knowledge so that like that's a thing we can be doing at this time. So make sure you're really following all that, because there's some awesome resources out there.
Yeah. I was typing in that iwannabeavoiceactor.com. I think that's cool. So Mary Tupin again said, do you recommend, it's actually a good question because we do tell them this about the importance of social media for on camera, but I'm intrigued because you don't necessarily know what the person looks like 9 times out of 10 in your world. So do you recommend social media for the kid actors, does it help book jobs, etc.? But how important? Where's the importance placed on social media presence in the voiceover world, Alicia?
I mean, I think everybody's going to have slightly different opinions on this. I am of the opinion for both on camera and for voiceover that it is not necessary for you to have a social media presence as a kid unless you want to. I think that, you know, a lot of parents of actors create social media for their kids, and that's good, fine and dandy if you want to do it, or if your child really loves creating content and wants to be doing it because they love that, like that's great. But I think it's really rare that anybody is going on and like looking at your numbers, looking at that, especially as a kid, and definitely for voiceover. I mean, Molly can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I've never heard of anybody saying, well, how many followers do they have? Especially
not just the Audition, for sure. I mean, nobody looks at that. Yeah.
Right. And like and for on camera, it can actually be a detriment for like we have clients that are influencers that that's actually prevented people from getting jobs because there's kind of a stigma that comes with influencers that they're not actors. And sometimes they are. Sometimes they're actors first that become influencers, or both of them are separate. But a lot of times, a lot of casting directors, especially older school casting directors, but they'll see that somebody has, you know, that someone's grown their following from being an influencer, and they say, oh, they're not an actor. So they don't have faith in their acting ability. It doesn't mean that it's not, but I have had it prohibit people from getting jobs before. So I would say if your kid loves Instagram and like loves creating funny content and being on TikTok and doing these funny videos, we were talking about TikTok before, like go for it. Like we want you, like if your kid's having fun, do it for sure, but don't do it just because you think that they should have it, because I'm not looking kids up on social media ever, really.
That's interesting. But I want to ask you too, Molly, because who was I on with? The last live, or I don't remember if it was Sharon Lieblein or the one before that, that said, I'm looking at TikToks right now for looking like seeking clients, or I'm looking at Instagrams and seeking clients. I think maybe it was modeling because I had the director of Elite Models. I think it was that. So that was a little bit different. But Molly,
is that like, again, if your kid loves creating like hilarious content on TikTok, like sure, I'm scrolling through TikTok, I hate to say it, and if I see someone hilarious, like sure, I might be like, who is this kid? I want to reach out to them. But it's very obvious when that's not organic. Like,
but it has to be organic.
A profile for the sake of having a profile, like you don't need a following. If your kid loves creating and they're hilarious, like that's great. Like do it, and that could help, but don't do it just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, Molly, what about you? Is it important on your side?
I agree with Alicia. I do not think it's necessary for kid actors on the VO side to have any kind of a social media following. If I were a live action casting director, I would be saying the exact opposite. I'd be like, yes, if you are interested in any kind of social media, definitely showcase your talents online, because that's how live action casting directors do a lot of their scouting. That's how I do a lot of my scouting for adult actors. I will look at character work that's done on Instagram, on TikTok. But for kids, no, I am just of the philosophy that they shouldn't be doing anything that they really don't want to be doing. So, like, if a kid is really just social media averse, because like Alicia and like you said, it has to be organic, and you can always tell if a kid is just being pushed into something or if they just aren't comfortable. And like, I don't care how they look on camera as long as they can deliver the voice and the acting that we need. So, if I were coming as a live action rep, I'd be like, yes, make Instagram videos every week. But I'm not.
And it is like, I think Alicia said it. It is. So there are different opinions out there. You know, there are people that place a little bit more weight on certain things, you know, on social media. And then there's ones that are like, I don't really care. But there's, I think, a common thread, which you guys can maybe attest to this, is if you are going to do it, the organic thing, yes, but also be careful of what you're putting out there, especially if you're looking to get into Nickelodeon or Disney or whatever, because Nickelodeon and Disney are a brand. You need to make sure that you're not going against that. Would you guys agree?
1000%.
Yeah.
I know that when live action casting directors at our studio are doing scouting online, it is an immediate deterrent. And I don't mean to speak for them, but it's an immediate deterrent if anything doesn't seem like it fits in with our brand. So, like a ton of cursing or
Yeah.
inappropriate humor, like that, if you're looking to get into the child space, like the child acting space, then no, I would highly suggest to not post things like that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I would say if your goal is to be acting either way, like whether it's kids space or not, like I've had situations where I've looked kids up on Instagram for whatever reason. Maybe they submitted and said something about social media, and their like little tagline is written with all these typos, written like uppercase, lowercase, whatever. And it's like, that's fine. You're a teenager, do what you want. But at the same time, like, is that how our relationship's going to be from an agent to, is that how you're going to talk, like email me? Is that how you're going to email and communicate with production? Like, it's definitely a deterrent. So just knowing that if you're trying to get into the space of being on camera or being a actor or anything in the entertainment business, anything that is public on the internet, it should be representing you professionally, because that's just the area you've chosen to go into.
Yeah, I agree. All right, ladies. So we're almost done. Usually we just wrap up and just kind of like last minute words of wisdom. And you guys were amazing. That 55 minutes went by like that.
Yeah, really.
Last minute words of wisdom for parents and kids in your space of voiceover animation, or let's go from the rep side first, Alicia.
Yeah, I would say VO is a really fun world. It's a lot of work and in a different way than on camera is. So some kids eat it up. It's their favorite thing. Other kids it doesn't correlate well. So if your kid loves doing it, that's awesome. If they don't, I wouldn't push it, because it's a lot of auditioning, like more so even than on camera, without feedback. Like you really have to have that passion. And if you do, the biggest way to study is watch cartoons. Like let your kids watch cartoons, listen to characters. Like kids always love that we say the biggest homework for animation is to watch cartoons, but it's real. So just really develop your characters by listening and watching and seeing what's out there.
Being a sponge, yeah. Molly, from the buyer side, basically.
The buyer. I agree with everything you just said, Alicia. I think that the most important thing is, yes, these are jobs. These are, if a kid comes to an audition, there is the expectation that, okay, if you book a job, you are now a working actor. And there's a lot of pressure that is associated with that. But I think something that always needs to be remembered is that you are children and you have to have fun and you have to enjoy it. And like I said before, there needs to be some level of desire, because it's very, very obvious when you're in a booth with a kid and they just don't want to be there, and like they just would rather go hang out with their friends or play video games or whatever. And so it needs to start with a desire on the kid's part, and from there, if there is a true desire, like with any hobby or talent, practice, practice, practice. So if the dream is to be a voiceover actor, do your homework, study, like Alicia said, watch cartoons, watch commercials. What are the differences? How are actors changing up their voice? How are they embodying the character? Who are actors that you emulate? It's always great to have a hero, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if E.G. Daily is a great example. There are so many young actors that want to be the next E.G. Daily. That's amazing. So now you have a goal, right? E.G. can do so many different things. That's an amazing goal to try to attain. So it's really just, it's at the end of the day, like if you want to be there, then put in the work. And I think that could be said with any skill or talent, but it's a special world. So,
Amen. It's a magical world. I mean, it's the world of imagination, and cartoons and things is a magical world. It's where we all kind of started it, just in life. So if you get to be a part of it, I mean, you really want to work hard at it. So
absolutely.
Well, I can't thank you guys enough. This was amazing, ladies. Thank you so much to Alicia Beekman from DDO Artist Agency. And
thank you for having
me. So much to Molly Miller, casting associate at Nickelodeon Animation Studios. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay safe out there.
Bye, guys.
Bye.